Hello, everyone from Chelsea Fan TV. I hope you're all doing very well on this Wednesday lunch show. Apologies, a couple of minutes late. Stephen, I know you don't have to rub it in my face. Listen, we are back with some more Chelsea news, some more updates regarding the club. Obviously, last night, I did a show and I went through the recent article from The Athletic, going through the financials and seeing why Chelsea are apparently able to spend all this money still without any sort of repercussions short term. That was a longer show than I expected. That was meant to be an hour. That was 2 hours. Long article. We're going to be speaking more about the positives. We're going to be talking about Roman Abramovich, and we're going to be going through all of the other latest things to do with our players. Obviously, Joao Felix as well, AC Milan, Chukwuemeka, number of players to speak about. How's it going, Dan? How are you, mate? It's been a long time, as we said, since we've done anything like this virtually.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it's been a while. I'm all right. Away from football, I think it's been good for me recently. But yeah, football has been really strange when it comes to Chelsea. I feel like we're in such a weird space right now with where the club's been, where the club's heading, all these stories coming out as well. I mean, it's just only going to make it a more difficult situation for Clearlake when Roman's stories come out. I mean, it's going to be an exceptional read, I think.
What do you think? Do you think there's anything that, do you have any conspiracies about the sale of Chelsea? Anything that you think, oh, nobody speaks about this, but I reckon this actually happened? Or are you just sort of very much bound by the facts and what we've been told, via journalists, etc.?
Yeah, I don't think there'll be too many conspiracies. I don't want to get sort of too into that between politics and the war that was going on. But I think what we will see is just how out of Abramovich's hands it was, how forced it was, the fact that he probably had zero control over what direction his beloved Chelsea was going to go in. And I think that'll be the thing that he would have found the most frustrating throughout the whole process, is that he really had no control in what would happen to the club. And I think we're sort of seeing now that would have been his fears, that his club could go from, well, one, he probably never wanted to lose it, and two, it could go from winning what it was and at the level and stature that he'd got it to in 20 years to now being in disarray for the last 3 seasons since he lost his ownership.
Mate, every time I speak about Abramovich, like the longer we don't have this man at our football club, the more sort of depressing it is to talk about him because of what we became under him, what we were under him. I don't know how old you are, but my whole lifetime basically supporting Chelsea, we've all known Don Roman, and now I've got fans like Jacob that I speak to after the games, and I don't want to criticize Jacob because he's obviously very young, but maybe he doesn't actually remember a lot of the success that we had. So then when he sees what Chelsea are going through, as many other young fans out there, they don't really know any different. And they're going, well, we finished 6th. It's not that bad. We were better than X amount of other teams. And it's like, yeah, but we used to just be better than all of them. Isn't that what you want? Isn't that the standard that we're striving towards? And even if we're not striving towards that standard, can we not at least feel like our ownership are trying to get us to that stage? Which obviously we don't feel at the moment. It's just totally different the way we're being run.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complete 180, isn't it, really? It was win at all costs, absolutely ruthlessness around every single thing that happened at the club. It was from the very bottom of the club, where you've got certain members of staff who are on low wages. They're giving up a lot of time. They're there as, dinner ladies, ground staff, people like that. They were all manufactured and employed, and were all focused on making this club as good as it can be, as great as it can be, and focus on getting the players to win, right? And I feel like every single thing has been removed that was part of the, every ingredient in the perfect recipe has now been switched out and changed. And that's why we're seeing a completely different approach. And it's been really frustrating. I mean, look, I don't want to come across that I'm really anti them, and I'm not. I think they ripped up a blueprint that gave them the keys to success without much thought process around it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I have heard things about Chelsea trying to sort of not change our approach, but I guess it is changing our approach, going for more experienced players like we've heard about. Virgil van Dijk, we've heard, Jonathan Tah's been thrown around as well. Osman is still a name that's heavily linked with Chelsea, even though I don't think that deal is going to happen. I think it should happen, but I don't think it will. Yeah, so there are names being thrown around there. De Bruyne, another one, who obviously used to play for Chelsea. Like, first of all, we have to look at, can we actually offer these players what they want? Because I think we can all agree we'd pay fees for players. We play hefty transfers. We've done it before many, many times. So if we want to buy a player, we can buy a player. But then it comes all down to whether they'll fit into our wage structure. And let's just look at Osman, for example. I'm not sure what his wage is at the moment. It's about $250,000 a week, something like that. And then you look at our best player, Cole Palmer. He's on 130 grand a week. And where does Victor Osman fit into that? Where he fits into our wage structure? Obviously, he's going to be a higher earner than Palmer. I'm not saying that we wouldn't bring him in if he's on 150. Of course we would. But what's he willing to accept that we can offer, and how far are we willing to go? I guess there's two answers to this. There's the Champions League option, which is everyone gets a 30% bump with our incentivized contracts. And the other side is we get Europa League, but we still pay a premium to get a player that will propel us into a Champions League position. But are Chelsea willing to take that risk? Are we willing to, break our structure for one player, knowing that that could be the catalyst for us being genuinely successful as a club?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that they are anymore. I think if there was 100% proof that we were focused around winning and that the ruthlessness was there still, we may see them be more willing to break their sort of wage structure, because I think they might have got to the point now where they realise that actually there are players out there that can make a greater difference on the pitch, but they do come at a greater cost. I think it just shows, by the way, how much money is going to be available should this team qualify for Champions League football if they can bump the contracts up 30%. I mean, it's an exceptional pay rise for anyone, really. But when you're talking about footballers' wages, the numbers go from being, Cole Palmer, if he is on 150 grand a week, you're looking at a huge increase there, about 45,000. So it'll be up towards 200. So when you're putting numbers up around 200, I think you can attract some of the biggest players in the world, but you have to obviously get to that stage first. And I think we're going to crucially miss out on Champions League football, which means the money won't be coming in to attract those bigger players.
Where do you think we're going to finish?
I think we'll be doing well to finish in 6th place with the form that we've sort of been in. It's been a bit hit and miss with the Conference League to navigate, with the lack of rotation options, the injuries that we've had repeating themselves again. Maresca's misdemeanors, if you like, the way he speaks to the crowd. I think he's got the crowd on his back now. His constant issues around selection, and ultimately a very tough Premier League run-in and a lack of goals up front. I think it's going to be very difficult for Chelsea to get Champions League football.
Yeah, man, I'm with you on that. I mean, to be honest, I thought it was a write-off after Brentford. I was like, we're done. But listen, I'm here to be proven wrong. And as much as I dislike our manager, I will never dislike Chelsea being successful. And I think that's where some people seem to be like, Alex, hang on a sec, why are you celebrating when we scored against Fulham? Hello? I was a Chelsea fan before Maresca. I was a Chelsea fan before Bowley. I actually quite like our team winning. That's kind of the point. But, some people don't necessarily understand it. Let's go on to sort of the details of Abramovich, where this has come out. It's been reported by Nazar Kinsella, who is a BBC Sport Football News reporter, and it's only come out recently, 4 hours ago, with regards to Chelsea, the former Chelsea owner. Sorry, what's happening? We'll go through the article over here. It says former Chelsea owner Roman Abramovich will discuss the sale of the club in a new book set to be released this summer after giving his first interview in 4 years. Abramovich, who remains sanctioned by the UK government due to alleged links to Russian President Vladimir Putin, has conducted a 2-part interview about the $2.5 billion sale of Chelsea in 2022 to American consortium Todd Boehly and Clearlake Capital, a deal which took place after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The interviews took place in Abu Dhabi in January and in Istanbul a year prior, and are said to have included Abramovich accounts of his initial takeover of Chelsea in 2004, the sanctions, his efforts in the previous peace process, and his suspected poisoning in March 2022. Before these, Abramovich's most recent interview was to Forbes in March 2021. And aside from a short statement in January that year about Frank Lampard's sacking and statements about Chelsea's Say No to Anti-Semitism campaign, he had not given an official interview since 2006, so a long, long time. The book is named Sanctioned, and it's the inside story of the sale of Chelsea Football Club, and it's written by Nick Purwell. And we'll also tell other stories from that accelerated 95-day sale, which was run by Rainbank under the supervision of the UK government, and will be released by Biteback Publishing this summer. The funds from the sale remain in a frozen bank account while Chelsea are aiming to qualify for the Champions League and win a trophy for the first time under the new American ownership. So, I mean, what's your initial reaction to that, Dan? Any surprises there, or is it basically what you expected? I mean, I'm surprised he hadn't done an interview since 2006. That's a long time.
Yeah, I think it is a long time, but I think what we need to remember about Roman is that he was incredibly mysterious. He was a guy that kind of worked in the shadows, if you like, in the background. We never really heard much from him, but we knew exactly what he was demanding from everyone because he spoke with his actions, and actions do speak louder than words. And I think we saw that clip, obviously, that of Ben Egbali walking past you guys after the game the other week, and there was sort of a bit of an outcry from Chelsea fans, sort of asking for, come and say something. You need to say something. You need to tell us what's going on, because we're not seeing any action now. And that was the difference, I think, with Roman, is that he didn't come out and do these interviews, and he didn't sort of speak to the Chelsea fans publicly, for sure, but he would act in a manner that told us exactly where we stood as fans, exactly what was being demanded from the players. And that was the beauty of Roman Abramovich. We had this relationship with him that was formed not with words, but through actions and the same beliefs around what our football club deserved and expected. And I think to see there that it was so many years without, so many years with very few words, it doesn't surprise me. I think even this interview that comes out will be very limited, and it will be a lot of reading between the lines with what's said. But I think it will be interesting to see just how difficult a time it was for him going through the sort of things that he had to go through throughout that period. It's the sort of stuff that many people never have to deal with. I mean, the bigger you and richer you are, the bigger the name and richer you are financially, normally the bigger the problems are as well. So there'll be problems that, most people never have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, another thing as well, like this was a debate going around on Twitter, especially after, I don't know if you saw the clip of Egbali walking past us after the Warsaw game. Did you see that?
Yeah, that's what I was referring to about they've been good, and I think they have spoken out at times, but I think we have to remember just how limited our best ever owner was in terms of communication at the same time. But I think we've seen less action, haven't we, with Clearlake in terms of where this club's heading than we did with Roman.
I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, they have spoken a lot. Bowley has spoken a lot, but it's never been to us. It's always been to
Bloomberg.
Yes, Bloomberg, and Bloomberg's a big one. And what was the other one? Oh God,
he's done a couple of summits, hasn't he, where he's spoken about the club and the direction it's headed in. And you're right, actually, you are right. It has normally been Bowley, but as a chairman of the club, I think it probably falls on him as his responsibility to do so. I think that's the beauty of the role and the situation for Egbali right now, is he seems to be making a lot of the calls without much backlash whatsoever. And I think we found as well that when big calls or stories have been made or come out around this Chelsea ownership and consortium that's in control at the moment, it's been at times where they've been able to sort of keep away from the flack and the criticism that might have followed, because they've done it during international breaks, they've done it during the summer. They've managed any heat and backlash pretty well, I would say, to keep themselves out of the limelight currently, Blueco.
Yeah, I got some responses on Twitter as well, and they were saying, like, you know what I mean? Like, Abramovich would have was happy to come over and speak to fans. I know CFC Fan UK, for those of you who don't know the fanzine, only £1. Match going fans will be very familiar with that term. He put a picture up with Abramovich holding his magazine. He said, I took this in, I think it was Benfica when they won the Europa League. Always willing to, shake people's hands, stop and say hello and have a chat. But I don't know necessarily if Abramovich would have been willing to stop and do interviews with Chelsea Fan TV, as an example. I don't really think that that's something that many owners would do. I mean, we've been lucky to bump into Todd a couple of times and haven't got much out of him, but we've spoken to him. I think one time I asked him to give us another shout out, and he said, I'm not going to say that. And I think I spoke about the trip to Austria. He said, yeah, that was good fun. And another game later down the line, I think when we beat Newcastle last season, I can't remember. I think we beat them. But I basically asked him about the performance, and he said no comment. And I thought, what? So I asked you what you thought of the game. And at that point, you knew he'd been PR trained. People had told him, like, you can't speak to the fans like that. Which I guess you can understand, but also, like, if you are genuine, you can just have a simple conversation. You don't have to give your cards away. Like, I've heard this about Jason Gannon, who, I don't know I think what's his position now? CEO or something like that, at Chelsea. He's replaced Chris Jurasek, obviously got a promotion. When it came to the Stamford Bridge sleep out, which was for charity, there was a fan that I bumped into at, was it Ipswich? I can't remember if it was Ipswich. It was one of the away days recently. And basically said that he had a chat with Jason Gannon for a couple of hours. And he was like, yeah, it was really surprising that he was, willing to spend time with the fans. But then it's like all comes back down to what is the real agenda here? Like, what are they actually trying to achieve? What do they want to get the fans on side? What do they care about? A relationship with the fans. And I think that comes down to the CPO, actually, and having the power to be able to control what happens with the stadium and the pitch. That's a separate conversation altogether. But yeah, me personally, I look at this ownership and I think that you've got two owners who, quite frankly, don't really care about the club. I think that Bowley has better interest for Chelsea than Eghbali. But in a weird way, Eghbali's kind of a nice owner to have instead of Bowley, because Eghbali will leave. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Because obviously he works in private equity.
Yes and no. I feel like both would be open to leaving with the surprising amount of backlash they probably got. To be honest with you, I think they're probably incredibly shocked. I don't think they really realised what it feels like to be on the sort of receiving end of unhappy football fans, especially when a club's been as successful as it was, and the differences are night and day. To be honest with you, I think they're incredibly surprised. I think we've seen they've both sort of taken a bit more of a back seat out of the limelight. Like you said, they've sort of completely cut ties with the fans in terms of speaking, especially on camera. I've heard stories about them communicating at games off camera, and I've heard some positive things, nothing too sort of surprising, just the fact that they do want this team to try and win. And I think that's their sort of very basic PR message out to the fans, is that they're trying their best. I heard a conversation the other day, reportedly, was that Maresca's working 17 hours a day to do everything he can. And I think they obviously are new to football, and they probably view that as an excessive amount of hours, and he is really trying. But I think once you've been in the game or you're a fan who has a very good understanding, or you listen to press conferences, it's not unnormal for managers to be at the training ground, sleeping at the training ground. We've seen some of our best managers barely leave the training ground. So
Mauricio Sarri, I think, used to sleep at the training ground, didn't he?
Mourinho has obviously dedicated his life to being at his clubs and stayed in hotels, training grounds. These guys are 100% dedicated if they're going to win, because of the pressure and the mental sort of mindset and requirements it takes to go and win these biggest trophies. And I think they obviously view that as something that's incredible, and it's probably not to the same level as maybe like Graham Potter was doing. We don't know. But ultimately, I think when you hire the very best and you witness the elite work, you'd realise that actually isn't something that special to write home about. And ultimately, Maresca's working hard, but there are other managers out there that can work just as hard and get far better results. And I think that's something the ownership are yet to learn right now.
Interesting from Callie. He says, what's your point? Maresca's hard work shouldn't be appreciated. But then I guess it comes back to, like, I could work hard and be Chelsea's manager.
Yeah.
Like, anyone could work hard.
I think he jumped the gun there. I don't think he actually let me finish my point.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, I think I summarised and sort of said that the point of the matter is that you can obviously hire someone that's willing to work hard, but the results might just not be there. You can hire people that are willing to work hard and have a proven track record of results.
Yeah, good to see Donna back in chat. Big up to Donna. Alex, am I giving you more loyalty vibes lately? No, Donna, because you didn't jump on my stream last night. I don't see where the loyalty. Where were you late at night, Donna? Where were you? Who were you with? So no, I'm not seeing it. You can try and gloss over it with all this nice chat, but I didn't see you last night, Donna. So once every week on a stream's not going to cut it, I'm afraid. That's not loyalty. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, Dan. Looking at Maresca, though, like the Fulham result is obviously, it's very hard to criticize that because you're like, we fucking won, and the way we won was great. I'm very much on the side of the players are playing for the manager. I don't believe this notion that they're not playing for him and they don't want to play for him and they're not trying. Maybe Nkunku is an exception. I think he's been massively mismanaged, though. That's another conversation. So then it comes down to mentality, it comes down to system, it comes down to tactics, it comes down to all those different things and a feeling as well. You know, sometimes you just have that winning feeling or that feeling that you enjoy playing your football. I mean, what's your take on Maresca at the moment? I mean, are you Maresca in? Are you Maresca out? Do you think he needs more time?
Well, I think he quite clearly needs more time because I do think he's struggled. He's shown that he's not willing to adjust, and he obviously, the time that he's spent at the club right now hasn't been a long enough sort of spell for him to realise that some of his tactics and ideologies around football aren't going to get him results at the highest level. And I think eventually he'll realise that. Unless he is just too stubborn, he won't. But for me, I think the relationship's incredibly broken right now. I think we saw, obviously, the toxicity aimed towards him from the fans during that Fulham game. I think it was the worst I've seen, probably even worse than Pochettino got last season, in a worse position in the table, because I think Poch never really hit back out at the fans. But for Maresca to blame, ultimately, footballing mistakes and tactical mismatches on the fans and the situation in the environment, I think that's a step too far, and I think that's a huge issue for me. I don't think a manager should ever resort to blaming the club's fans for the issues on the pitch, and I think that's a very, very difficult situation to come back from. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I'm Maresca in, I'm Maresca out. I don't think he was ever the right choice. I don't actually think the board have ever hired the right choice, in my honest opinion, but they've sort of made their bed. They've got a lie in it. This is the guy they've given another big contract to, and eventually, when everyone sort of learns their lesson, I'll believe that the club will start to move in the right direction. But I think if you sack Maresca now, we're just going to be in exactly the same sort of situation that we were after sacking Poch. That I don't trust this hierarchy to hire someone that is good enough for Chelsea, to be honest with you. And I also feel like we've put ourselves in a position where a lot of the managers we would view as good enough for Chelsea probably don't find the job attractive and a good match for them right now.
I think that's also another reason as to why we gave Maresca such a long contract. And I think that you'll find if we were to sack another manager and bring someone else in, irrespective of whether they're better than Maresca or not, I think you'd probably see something similar. I think you'd probably see another 5-year deal, because other than the fact that you have a long deal, what do you have to prove that the club are going to back you and support you? You don't necessarily have the financial backing anymore because that's been and gone. You don't have experienced players. You don't have winners. You've got a club that's not very patient in terms of the fan base. And I just don't really see what Chelsea have to offer. Like we really don't have much pull as a club from a management perspective, from a player perspective. That can obviously change with Champions League football, but I don't think we're going to get it. You said earlier on you don't think we're going to get it, and I think that's a perfectly logical approach. I mean, maybe I was being emotional after Brentford, but I mean, we haven't seen anything in 2025 to support an argument that we deserve to finish in European football. Forget Champions League. I mean, it's been that bad. So, yeah, Maresca obviously needs more time. I mean, I'm personally of the opinion that if he does finish Champions League and gets the Conference League, like I'll hold my hand up and I'll say, you know, it is what it is. Like, fair play to you. I'm not going to shit on a manager who's achieved his targets, the bare minimum. I feel like we did that under Poch last season, by the way. Our bare minimum was European football. We achieved that. We actually achieved Europa League, but we got knocked back because of United winning the FA Cup. FA Cup, yeah. If we were a Newcastle situation and we'd been bumped out of European football altogether, I would have been fair enough. You know what? He didn't do it, and you can sack him for that reason. It's a game of thin margins, but you've got to be successful ultimately, and we achieved that target. If we get Europa League, I know it is technically a step in the right direction if you want to get really technical. You go from no European football to Conference League to Europa League. Do you think that's another good building block for us to, prove that this project is moving in the right direction? Or do you just think like it's a load of waffle, like we should be getting Champions League? That's, the long and the short of it.
I think you're right. I think the long and the short of it, well, not that you were making that exact point, but I think, yes, the long and the short of it is Chelsea should be in the Champions League. We've won it twice. We should be doing everything we can to be winning it again and building this club around being a successful elite European force. But for me, the issue I've got with it is that it will be used as a stepping stone. It will be used as a point around progress, even though I don't think, if you read between the lines, it does suggest linear progress at all. I think the matter of the fact is that we did qualify for the Europa League last season and unfortunately lost out of it on a technicality with Manchester United winning that FA Cup. This year, obviously, more European space is available to Premier League teams, but for me, I think it's a concern that Chelsea are sort of aiming and accepting Europa League football and Conference League football as acceptable milestones for a club that have spent over £1 billion. I just don't think that the two go together very well at all, to be honest with you. I think if you're spending that kind of money, you should be absolutely demanding that your team are earning money that can work, earning financial rewards that are in alignment with the sort of finances that have been put into the club. Like you said, there was the documents that come out that we have quite clearly put in the most money, or our ownership have put in the most money out of any club in the Premier League over the last 3 seasons by quite a huge amount. And only Champions League.
It's ridiculous, mate.
Yes,
like, you wouldn't believe it.
It's pretty much 3 times what any other Premier League club's ownership have done. And I think the fact of the matter is you have to be in Champions League football and fighting on all fronts to create revenue to sort of pay back that sort of money that's been put into the club and start to move this club in the right direction in terms of results on the pitch and financial results too. I think if a club are failing on the pitch, there'll be ultimately issues around their success financially as well. But yeah, look, I think Chelsea should be in the Champions League. Absolute bare minimum for me is Champions League football. I think we should be having a far greater sense of importance around trophies again. I feel like it's been 3 seasons where it's been a bit sort of like, nah, it doesn't really matter if we don't win that. It doesn't matter if we win that. We're trying to fix things on the pitch and get the right blend of a young squad. But 3 years is a long enough time for that process to be moving in the right direction. And I wouldn't say that it's getting there at the speed we should be seeing it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting point as well, actually, Khaled makes is Chelsea winning the Europa League is bigger and better for our young squad than getting destroyed in the Champions League. I actually think that's a very interesting point. And when I've spoken to people outside the ground, I've had this conversation plenty of times. And a lot of people are in agreement that we would get destroyed if we were in the Champions League this season. So that tells you there's an awful lot of work to be done to get us to where we need to be if we were in the Champions League next season. Obviously, we need a striker, our centre-backs. We've got a problem with our goalkeeper. If Vega was to leave, for example, we wouldn't have any cover for Cucurella on the left side. Our wingers, we might not have Sancho, Mudryk as well. He's got his doping ban, which we still haven't really had a result on. Although some positive news came out about that yesterday. We can touch on that briefly later on in the video. So I think that's a very fair argument, but that doesn't justify, though, why finishing in the Europa League is better for Chelsea. But I mean, if you wanted to extract some sort of positive, I guess that's probably the only one that you could put.
Yeah, I mean, my concern would be if we were to just sort of accept that Europa League football would be better for this team to go and win, is that one, it's an incredibly what-if moment, because, I mean, it's not even guaranteed that we win the Conference League as easy as it should be for this club. Europa League football can be challenging, especially for a young side without much of a winning background. I think we did very, very well as a strong, experienced side to win the Europa League twice, but we saw just how difficult it can be for the likes of Arsenal with a younger, inexperienced team who hadn't won much to go and win that competition. It proved very difficult for them. I think ultimately that the rewards of playing in Champions League football are far greater than winning the Europa League, in my honest opinion, because if there is progress made in the Champions League, the financial incentives are there, obviously, for all these players in terms of their personal life, but also they'll be playing against the biggest players in the world, which is normally a reason players cite to leave. I think playing Champions League football is a huge incentive for players to join your football club. And I think the finances that can be raised just through qualifying through the league phase in the Champions League become equal to, if not more, than what you'd get for winning the whole Europa League. So to suggest that it's better for Chelsea to qualify for the Europa League is a little bit too far-fetched in one direction, just on the pure hope that we go and win that. I think the benefits for Chelsea are definitely reaped, and the rewards are far bigger qualifying for Champions League football.
Yeah, I've got to agree. I mean, I respect the positivity, Khaled, but I'm not seeing that argument, to be honest with you. It's interesting as well when we look at some of the players that we have. I mean, we're talking about players we want to bring in. Chelsea forward Joao Felix has already begun talks over an emotional return to his former club, Benfica, this summer. I mean, we've joked about him going back to Benfica, but this is a genuine this is probably the first time I've heard this come out from a source. Whether it's reliable or not, I let people make that decision for themselves. It's caught offside. I don't know if they've actually made any big calls in the past. Not entirely sure, but I mean, for me, doesn't surprise me whatsoever. He's not good enough at this level. I think he's a good squad player, but his ego is too big to not play week in, week out. So if you're going to take the step down and go back to Portugal, I think that's probably the best move for his career. But then it comes down to the finances. We will not sell this guy without making a profit. We will not do it. I think in a realistic world, you probably see a loan deal next season, maybe even a 2-year loan deal with an option to buy then for some sort of fee. But there's no world in which I see Benfica paying whatever it is, 40, 50 million pounds for a player who, quite frankly, hasn't improved himself at any club since leaving Benfica in the first place.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. I think Joao Felix's career has been incredibly frustrating for anyone watching him, as well as probably himself. I feel like he had a lot of promise at a young age and has really failed to deliver. He's been at a number of Europe's biggest club and has been considerably underwhelming. He's actually a player I really like to watch. I find him quite exciting. I feel like there's a bit of a concern around end product, but it's a player.
Do you find him frustrating to watch, though, Dan?
Yeah, because I think the talent's there for him to be regarded as a far better player than what he actually is. I think actually what happened is he's probably never really developed, like you said, much more than when he was at Benfica, and that looked like a real promising talent. But really, it's looking like that was his ceiling, and he hit that at an incredibly young age.
Oh, mate, I've got some breaking news. People.
Oh, no.
You can look at this and take the pot. I actually don't know entirely what to think. I haven't made my decision on whether I'm happy or unhappy yet. Chelsea have already activated the clause to make Jadon Sancho's transfer for Manchester United permanent, with sources describing the club figures as viewing it as a smart investment. I mean, that's proper Chelsea, net smart investment. Fucking hell.
Yeah.
What about a winning investment?
Look, I think Jadon Sancho was done at Manchester United from the moment he left on loan to come to Chelsea, because I think for them to allow him to join another Premier League team sort of suggested that that relationship had broken down. I don't think there was any sort of incentive for the club to keep him. I actually think for the price and what Jadon Sancho offers, it is a pretty much win-win situation. As much as he probably isn't ever going to be this star player, we've only paid less than sort of 25-30 million for a player that is, you know, as a rotation option, not too bad, to be honest with you. I think with the issue around Mudryk as well and having to go out and replace probably another left winger, there's sense around signing Jadon Sancho. And look, I'm not his biggest critic. I actually think when the team is playing well, I think Jadon Sancho is the type of player that will thrive. And if the situation is, you know, not toxic, I think he does do well. But I think when it's bad, he's a very easy scapegoat for a lot of fans to find, because it almost looks like there's a lack of effort at times, you know. But he's stepped up with a couple of moments this season. I think about that goal the other week, obviously against Ipswich to get the draw was good. And I think he's been exciting at times. I don't think he's ever going to be, you know, this unbelievable £80 million winger, but we haven't paid that.
I mean, but like, I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head there with regards to, you know, him being a good rotation option. I'm firmly in agreement with that. I think that when you look at what you can do with 25 million, and you're never really going to get a reliable goal-scoring winger or creative winger for 25 million in the modern day market. I mean, if you're very smart with your investments and your signings, of course you can. But yeah, I think Sancho is sort of, he does have that quality. The thing I don't like about Sancho is his mentality. I don't think that he brings a winning mentality into this squad. I don't think he's a fighter. I don't think he's a particularly hard worker. Those are all things that I don't think necessarily rub off well on the squad. I think bar Noni probably got the worst attitude out of our wingers in the squad. Not necessarily one to kick up a fuss and complain, but just drops his head. And like I saw it a number of games, it just doesn't look like he's trying 100%. But I'm totally, I totally appreciate that when it comes to a player like Sancho, you need to just appreciate that he's not a consistent player. He's a player that needs a lot of game time to build his confidence, and he'll have good runs and he'll have bad runs. I'm seeing mixed reactions in the chat as well. Some people think it's a great signing, some people not quite as happy. I struggle to think of another player off the top of my head that I would sign for 25 million that brings you what Sancho brings you. I mean, Dan, can you think of anyone off the top of your head?
No, I can't, to be honest with you. I almost feel like it's probably a below market valuation. The fact that he's also English homegrown in terms of criteria, that always bumps up the price. So yeah, I think that's a deal that for Chelsea is pretty much a no-brainer. And I think for Manchester United, it just shows the risks you take when you do buy a player at a fee of around, you know, like 60, 80 million, whatever he cost. It can be incredibly frustrating and concerning, you know, if they don't perform. But if you sign a player for 30 million and it's just sort of by the by, and he does a good job as a rotation option, and he's sort of keeping the levels of the squad a little bit higher, I think he's the sort of player that you can have in your squad and afford to have, as long as you've got other players that are performing to a better level than he is. If you're relying on Sancho to be the be-all and end-all in your attack, or, you know, one of the most creative or goal-scoring sort of players in that attack, then I think that's where your problems would lie. But I believe Chelsea will sign someone who we sort of consider a better level than Jadon Sancho as well in the summer.
Yeah, I think as well, like we see some of the other options. These are the other players that we have been linked with: Garnacho, Gittins from Dortmund, Leao from AC Milan. You know, those are the other options that we've had. And I guess then it comes down to do you think that Sancho is better than those options? And do you think he's cheaper than those options? I mean, I think Leao certainly would cost more. Garnacho, I think United wanted 50 million. And Gittins, I'm not entirely sure what the value is. I think it's probably slightly lower, more along 40 or 30. Let me know in the chat if I'm wrong. I haven't had enough. I haven't been able to watch enough of Gittins to be able to really judge him. But I could say, if I was comparing Garnacho and Leao, for example, I mean, Garnacho's certainly a harder worker than Sancho. He's a runner. He's a good player. I actually like Garnacho. I don't despise him like Lewis does, but I don't think he's what Chelsea need, and I don't think that United actually will want to get rid of him. Like, you think about how rubbish they are. They want to keep hold of any players that can perform to half a standard, because their standards are just in the mud completely. I mean, think about how bad United's season is. It's actually worse than our season under Potter. Can you imagine? That is like the depths of hell as a football fan. I can't imagine anything worse. Leao would never track back. Just wouldn't fit the system at all. And then Gittins, like, I saw his stats at Dortmund, pretty good. But I've not seen enough of him to really judge. Have you seen Gittins playing much? Or?
Yeah, I mean, Jamie Gittins is an exciting young player, obviously a young English lad as well that went over to Germany in a similar sort of move to what Sancho did, actually, and has followed a slightly similar career path. I think he looks exciting. I don't know if that's exactly what Chelsea need, but I think he fits the mould of young, exciting, prospectual talent to come in if we were to go after him and sign him. But I don't think he would be considered a needle mover in terms of results on the pitch. I actually don't think any of the names I've seen Chelsea linked with around sort of that wide area or that winger sort of role have been needle movers. And I think ultimately, we touched on it very, very early on at the top of the show, is that Chelsea, if they are looking for players to sort of give us greater opportunity around winning trophies and, winning or gaining points in the Premier League, you've got to be looking at needle movers who are going to cost more money. But I think that's the key around this deal, is that it's cheap, it's affordable. The likelihood of making profit on him is still a potential if he does sort of enter a period of time where his performances, are back up to a level that excites England as a national team, and people get talking about Jadon Sancho again as they did before. He can quite easily drive profit for Chelsea in a deal like this. And I think he's obviously happy to come in and work on the wage structure that Chelsea have in place. So, if someone ticks all those boxes, like you said, it's hard to find someone at that price point that ticks all those boxes and is happy to be at the club.
Yeah, I mean, I've just saw something in the comments to do with Gittins' stats in for Dortmund. I actually had a look at this player a number of months ago. So when I said his stats were good when I looked, I'm not actually lying, because he was doing pretty well actually at that time. I mean, I'll just share my screen with you now. 28 appearances in the Bundesliga, 12 GA, 14 appearances in the Champions League, 5 GA. So that's 44 in total with 17 GA. So just under, probably about 40% conversion rate, something like that. So not the best, but at the time when I actually looked at Jamie Gittins, this was his form, and you could see that he was actually producing quite well. It's ever since sort of mid-January, that's when he's had a little bit more of a drop-off, because he's had a real quiet spell. You can see no goals. So he's been on the bench in the past 2 games as well. Yeah. Limited minutes, sort of up until, in a number of those games. I don't know why that is.
And I think if you look as well, Alex, Dortmund's results have been incredibly sort of lacking of consistency, if you like. There's a lot of losses. They've not found themselves in a great position in the Bundesliga. And he's a player that, is exciting and could potentially have a high ceiling. But it's another sort of player that's got, good numbers at the beginning of the season, really. To get 8 goals as a winger, I think are respectable numbers. I mean, I don't think Pedro Neto has ever got that, in any season he's played in professional football, and he still costs 60 million. So I think they're good numbers, but for a guy that's coming in with the hype that would be around Gittins coming in and a cost that it probably would be, I think it would be in excess of 50 million. Gittins isn't, for me, the right type of player that Chelsea should be bringing in and sort of putting ahead of players like Jadon Sancho, because I don't think there's too much of a difference to take us to the next level. I just don't think there will be. And 8 goals in a Dortmund team that haven't been doing too well. Yeah, it's good. It's okay. He's had a quiet patch. And I think what we're seeing there with his season this year is it's another player who's going to be inconsistent. And I think that's the biggest issue we've got in this squad right now is finding consistency and players' performances being consistent over a 38-game Premier League season. And I don't think Jamie Gittins would be ticking that box right now. But it's actually incredibly difficult to find many young players that are consistent to the levels you need to go and win the biggest trophies in football.
Dortmund want 84 million for him.
Yeah, I was going to say, if they sold Jadon Sancho for, over 80 million, then I would think that they'd want over 80 to 100 million probably. But, I don't think that is realistic for Chelsea to pay that, to be honest with you.
God.
So,
no way. Absolutely not. I mean, that's terrible business. I was thinking like the 30, 40 million mark, and you're telling me 80 million, no chance. 100 million euros, let's say 84 million pounds.
Yeah, so I would think for a deal to be done for Gittins, like I said, anything below 50 million would be incredibly shocking that would happen. I just don't think Dortmund are in a position to be letting players go for less than that, to be honest with you.
I mean, yeah, they said they've dropped the price. I mean, already the fact that it was 100 million staff would just tells me this is a guy that was a little bit overhyped at one point. Maybe given the thing is, you want to have more established players. You look at Gittins, he's 20 years old. That is probably the argument that if we were sitting in the boardroom right now discussing signings at Chelsea and we were given instructions by the ownership, because obviously if I was in the position to sign players for Chelsea, I would try and go for established winners. They have not been given those instructions. I guess the thing that you have on Gittins is he's younger. He's like 5 years younger than Sancho, isn't he? So there is more room to grow. And what you've seen in Sancho's career is, if we're being honest, a bit of a plateau, a regression. He's been better for Chelsea than he was at United. I mean, that's not that tough. At least with Gittins, there is some room for growth. Again, you're right, Dan. It's not needle movers, but would you rather have a player that's been essentially going downhill since he's moved to England, or a player who potentially could have an uptrend? I mean, it's a really difficult argument to make. I'm not saying it's the best thing to do, but you can kind of see both sides.
Yeah, and I think also what we've seen as well is a lot of players that have come over from the Bundesliga have struggled. There's definitely been a period of adaptation for a number of players. We've seen actually Manchester City be pretty successful in who they've recruited from the Bundesliga. But for Chelsea, it's not always been as simple as it should be. I think of Werner and Kunku, Havertz. These players have definitely struggled. Sancho as well has obviously thrived in the Bundesliga and struggled in the Premier League. So it's not an absolute guarantee that when a player costs that much, I think there has to be an almost guaranteed sort of ability there that you're buying and a guaranteed output that you're buying into and expecting that when they come to Chelsea. I think if you're paying the money that it would cost to get Jamie Gittins in, you're not buying consistency. You're not buying someone that moves the needle. And yes, okay, there could potentially be an upward trend, but how many of these players have we got in the team that are bought in for a potential upward trend? But how long are we willing to wait for that to happen? And if you keep buying players younger and a year younger, I mean, look, we've got Esteval coming in. Obviously, we've got Paez. We've got Quenda. Obviously, has been deal agreed now as well. So there's a lot of young, exciting attacking talent coming into Chelsea. Obviously, a little bit younger than Gittins as well. But Gittins and Garnacho have put up very good numbers for a 20-year-old, but I genuinely believe there are players that aren't too far away from that are capable of putting up even better numbers for not too much of a dissimilarity in price.
What about Carney Chukwuemeka? Because again, we've had someone Liam Twimmy, who I think he works at the Athletic. He says that he expects Chukwuemeka will remain a Chelsea player. That we would sell for the right price. That, if I'm not wrong, is 40 million as a release clause. But if they're saying it's the right price without saying an actual number, does that sort of insinuate that maybe we'd be willing to negotiate and go down a little bit further? Obviously, Niko Kovac, Dortmund's manager, is a big fan of Chukwuemeka. He's spoken publicly about how much he likes the player, his qualities, the fact that he would never be able to work with a player like Chukwuemeka if he didn't have game time at Chelsea. That's the only reason that he went to Dortmund. But I mean, if he's really interested and Dortmund are willing to negotiate, they're never going to pay 40 million for him because honestly, right now he's not worth it. But you can see, I see more than potential, Dan. I see a player who's ready. I see a player who is just ready to go. I see a player who's better than Nkunku. Would have been better for Chelsea than Nkunku this season in Maresca's system. I see a player who's just better than Joao Felix, full stop. Easily could be rotation for Cole Palmer in that number 10 position. But instead, we decided to freeze him out and trust other players who have underperformed and been mismanaged. I don't think that we should sell the guy. I really don't think that we should sell him. We paid just under 20 million for him. So anything upwards of that is still a profit. But like, is 5-10 million pounds in profit worth more than just having a solid midfield? Good cover for Cole Palmer. That's a position that we all know if we want to pay money for, that's going to cost you upwards of 50, 60, 70 million pounds for a player who still might not perform. And we know that Nkunku's capable. Chukwuemeka's capable. He just hasn't been given a chance under this manager.
Yeah, and I also think there's concerns around the wage that he was bought in comparison to what players have been bought in for now. He obviously come in under a different direction when Vivell was at the club, and there was sort of different sort of approaches to wage structure and the finances that were being spent on and where they were being allocated. So, look, difficult one for me. I think Chukwuemeka is an incredibly talented player, unlucky with injuries. I think that sort of found his game time incredibly limited at times when we could have found a use for him. We weren't able to rely on him, which is obviously an issue we've got in this squad at the moment with a number of young players that we've paid big money for not being able to stay consistently fit. But I've seen him at Dortmund. He looks good. It looks like an environment that he's, doing well in, looks happy and content in. And I think if the money does come in for Chelsea to turn a profit on him, then I think it'll be someone that they don't even bat an eyelid at now because he's out the door. The only way I ever see him staying at Chelsea is if potentially he comes back and Chelsea have Champions League football, then they can sort of look at the wages and sort of find a little bit of extra cash to keep someone like him around. But for now, I think a very talented player, but a guy that unfortunately has been mismanaged at Chelsea, whether that be by management or previous directors in terms of the wages that he's been put on and the expectation that's been created for him. He's just not been able to get there at the moment. But yeah, a really talented player that I think if injuries, are on his side and he doesn't get too many more, will be at the top of the game as an English talent in football.
100%, mate. 100%. I've always said I thought Chukwuemeka could become one of Chelsea's best players. I really, really believe that. I still believe that. I think wherever he goes, he'll be an absolute gem. Because he has everything. He's got height, he's got skill, he can score, he can assist, he's got pace, he can dribble. I don't see any part of the game that Chukwuemeka doesn't have, except maybe the fact that you can put consistency into the argument, but he's had injury problems. And injuries is probably the one weakness. If he can stay fit, there's no doubt in my mind he starts for a top team, Champions League team in world football. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I always manage to find myself comparing him to a really young Loftus-Cheek, actually. And
yes.
I always felt like there was almost an heir not to the throne, because I don't think Ruben ever had that, but, a younger player that sort of fitted the same mold and would come in and sort of find himself in a similar position at Chelsea. And I think the fans really took to Carney. I think they did really like him, and he scored that fantastic goal against West Ham. We thought the future was incredibly bright, and I think a lot of fans were sort of incredibly concerned to see him sort of shifted to the side for the likes of, someone like Joao Felix coming in for 45, 50 million. And I guarantee you right now, if Chukwuemeka had spent the season at Chelsea, given the opportunity that Joao Felix got, he probably would have had a better output, to be honest with you.
Mate, I'm seeing in the chat as well. I completely agree with Poya. I think he is a needle mover. I think he would make a massive impact at Chelsea. Not necessarily as a starter, as I said, but when Palmer needs a rest, you've got someone who will just perform, and that's it. Neil as well. Big up to Neil. Happy birthday! Hope you're doing well, Neil. Good to see you in the chat. He said it's my birthday, and the club sent me an email wishing me a happy birthday with a pic of Nkunku with the balloon. And I scratched off a gift of 20% at the mega store. It was 50% off on Friday. There you go, mate. Blueco, there's your gift from them. So wait, you got ripped off for a discount? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Wow.
That's where they're finding the 30% for Champions League wages.
Neil, you're paying the wages, mate. You are paying the wages. Oh my goodness. Well, happy birthday anyway, Neil. And did you get anything nice at least? Like, what did you get? Yeah, I mean, the thing is, well, going back to Chukwuemeka as well, it's like, if we were willing to, we were so, what's the word? Ruthless with players like Gallagher. And you think that they're going to even think if they get an offer of 35, 40 million for, I mean, 40 million is the release clause, so we definitely accept that, but let's just say 35. Still 15 million pound of profit for a player who, you know, you can get off the books, and you still got that loan fee as well from Dortmund. I don't know how much that loan fee was in total, but you're in and around the 40 million pound mark. So that is ultimately the way this football club has been run. It's not being run for footballing reasons. It's been run, unfortunately, for financial reasons. I mean, Dan, just finishing off, we've got the Club World Cup coming up. Apparently, we get 23 million pounds for entering the competition, and that will go up to about 30 odd million if we get to the quarterfinals, which I think is realistic. I don't think we get much further than that, to be fair. Yeah, that's something that can obviously improve our financial situation. How do you see us getting along in the Club World Cup? And are you excited for it? Because me personally, I think that's quite a cool competition. I like the way they've done that.
I think it has potential to be a really cool competition. I do think if they could get the marketing right and manage to convince some of the European nations that it is something that's worth being behind. You know, I think what has to happen is the boards have to take it seriously first, because they realise that you know, the financial incentives that's there behind it, right? Then if there sort of becomes that sort of prestige to be in the club that managed to get, you know, the 100 million extra to go in, and then you see the signings you can get off the back of it, and that isn't just sort of used to line the owners' pockets. I think they'll start to feel like there's a little bit more prestige. All you need is a real sort of heated game between a couple of European sides, and it might start to put in a bit of attention. You know, I think it's great because it gives a couple of teams to really like the opportunity to clash against some of the teams from other continents, which we've seen in the Club World Cup before. But because it was such a weird tournament against, you know, in the middle of the season when your focus was all on the you know, the English League or the Champions League, and it kind of took your focus away from that. And I remember when we won the Champions League in 2012, we went over to the Club World Cup, ended up not winning it, and it took obviously in like another decade to win it. It was always just sort of the badge looked cool that you got for winning it, but other than that, there wasn't really much prestige around it. I think now with the whole sort of shift in direction from FIFA, I think it's got potential. I really do, because you know, there's a lot of money in Saudi Arabian football where they're going to have some really good sides and some big names coming over. There's obviously, you know, American sides like some of the biggest.
Miami?
I'm not sure if Miami are in it, but I think they are.
Miami will be.
Yeah, so you know, you've got your Messis, you've got Ronaldo, obviously, you've got huge money on both sides of the continent. You've got football is becoming more and more a global game, and there is a lot of money around, you know, non-European leagues, and I think it gives the opportunity to see how these Premier League teams sort of do against these other leagues and just sort of judge where they are, because that'll be interesting. But the issue is it's the tickets were priced incredibly high. You know, it wasn't
put the prices down now.
They have because they've seen, you know, not much uptake in terms of people wanting to go. And I think that's the sort of struggle you've got, is I think you have to incentivize people in early, you know, get it on. Yeah, I mean, even BBC and ITV refused to cover it and put it on free-to-air TV. So it's only going to be on DAZN, and, you know, that's a whole nother deal and you want to do your research into that, because DAZN, I mean, they paid £1 billion, but have they really paid £1 billion? Is the question I think you'd be asking yourself after you read how they attained that billion to spend.
How go on, Dan.
Well, well, basically, without saying this is exactly what happened, FIFA definitely gave DAZN you know, the ability to spend £1 billion, basically. So, you know, it's one of those where it's obviously not going to be disclosed and put out there. But if you read up on how DAZN had £1 billion to spend, which is obviously a huge amount of money on a tournament that doesn't have much proof in the pudding that it's going to be worth that amount, they have done, and it will be free to air as well. So in terms of, you know, incoming for DAZN, it will be purely based on advertising rather than subscriptions as well. For a subscription based platform, that's not their probably normal you know, revenue generating process, isn't it? So yeah, look, it's a weird one, the Club World Cup. I think there's a lot of potential there. I think if you can get a little bit of prestige in that tournament and it really start to get a bit heated, and the South American clubs will take it seriously, and, you know, some of the other teams in CONCACAF and Saudi Arabia, I'm sure, are going to take it seriously, then I think you'll find the European teams starting to step up as well. So, you know, when you're looking at 100 million potentially being injected into your club on top of everything you could earn, imagine if you won the Champions League and then the same year you win the Club World Cup, you're in for an incredible amount of money that could completely sort of change the next 5 to 10 years for your football club if you could sign players off the back of that. So look, we've got one shot at it. I don't think we'll be in the next one unless we manage to win it. We might find ourselves in as like retaining champions. I'm not sure.
Is that a thing?
I'm not sure if it is, you
I'll
know,
take
but
that.
it'll be interesting to see. But it's look, I think it will be something that I will watch because I have an interest in the global game and just sort of seeing the players that are on show. A lot of young South American prospects will be on display. A lot of legends at clubs, you know, like Miami potentially, or Saudi Arabian teams will be on display. And ultimately, I want to see how Chelsea do and hope that we can sort of give ourselves a better footing going into the next season. I think what people will sort of see this is at first is a preseason tournament. I think that's what FIFA need to try and convince people that it isn't. It's a serious tournament, that they want it to be taken seriously. But, you know, we don't even know who our group stage opponents are going to be, with Leon obviously facing that sort of weird sort of set of charges that they've got.
Hey, well, listen, we'll have to see what happens. Dan, mate, where can people find you, mate? Where can people find you?
Yeah, it's just at BDB Dan on all the socials, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all those things. Just talking about Chelsea, talking about football, and holding my fingers crossed that we somehow manage to get Champions League football, because I think for all of us, no matter who we like or dislike, it's where this club belongs, to be honest with you.
Totally agree with you. I mean, guys, listen, check out Dan's channel. Subscribe to Chelsea Fan TV as well if you haven't already. And smash the like button. We've got over 100 of you in there. Takes a minute. Doesn't cost anything. Press that thumbs up. And listen, Dan, appreciate your time, mate. We'll jump on another show again very soon. And listen, guys, all the best. Appreciate your time. And we will catch up very, very soon.